MongoDB. Right? We're going to be using MongoDB as our permanent storage solution. Right? We can download Mongo from mongodb.org. And MongoDB is one of several vendors that provide alternatives to SQL databases, right? Relational databases. So relational databases have dominated the data storage market, for several decades, right? And they were designed at a time that trying to solve the problems of a particular time in our industry. Okay, today with the explosion of with so much data being generated, we're generating so much data that we're never going to be able to make sense out of any of it. So we're inventing new ways for for data mine all this information to aggregate this information and to summarize this information for us. Right, we're creating these artificial intelligence mechanisms that they can scour the data, all the terabytes of data that we're generating, right, and just summarize it for us, right, to try to extract knowledge from all this raw data. Okay, there's even there's new jobs being created and new careers on just data science. How is it that you deal with so much data? Okay. So anyway, so MongoDB is one of the breeds of databases that tries to solve this issue. How do you deal with this humongous amount of information? Okay, and also tries to use a format to store the data in a format that is friendly to today's problems. Right, from the late 90s, with the explosion of and the success of the web, and a lot of our applications starting to move towards the web, being implemented on the web. JSON has become the standard, the preferred standard to encode data that goes back and forth between different servers. Right? It used to be XML used to be very popular at the turn of the century. Okay, but more and more we see that JSON is becoming more prevalent, and that's because web pages use JavaScript to run on browsers, and they want to consume the data in a JavaScript-friendly format. Yes? So because of this popularity, we see that JSON is becoming more and more prevalent. So MongoDB and many other databases are now supporting ways to store data using this format, JSON format. Right? So instead of storing it in a binary, proprietary, vendor-specific format, right, it uses just plain old ASCII, right? But a binary version, a compressed version of a JSON, right? That is readily readable by a human being. Okay. Also, another important aspect is that it's not a relational database. Okay. So in relational databases, we typically, well, anyway, who's taken a 5200 or 3200? Okay. Not quite enough of you. So in relational databases, we split up information. We try to structure it, trying to avoid redundancy, trying to avoid inconsistency, and there's a whole set of skill set on how is it that you structure data, right, appropriately. And in MongoDB, we have similar issues, right? You still want to avoid these issues of redundancy and inconsistency, and we try to normalize the data. But unlike relational databases where we have foreign keys and primary keys, referencing each other, and we have multiple tables that can have records that are related to other records in other tables, and you can reference each other. But it's mostly a flat representation. Okay, here in MongoDB, the data storage is you store objects, right? You don't store records. You store objects. Objects that, in the full sense of the word, it has properties, and those properties can be of different data types. You can have properties that are arrays, right? That contain other objects, and you can have objects within objects nested inside of each other. Okay, so entire objects can be stored in MongoDB, as opposed to a record. In a record, you would have attributes that might be related to one another, but split up in many different tables, right? And then you need to use joins to fetch related data across many tables to reconstruct the original object. Yes, right? In MongoDB, you don't need to break it apart. You can store an entire object with all its attributes and sub-attributes and sub-sub-attributes, right? All inside as a single object, right? We don't call them records. We call them documents in MongoDB, right? We still have the capability of maintaining multiple tables. We don't call them tables. We call them collections, right? Big arrays of objects, just like in databases and relational databases, you have tables that contain records, right? In MongoDB, you have collections that contain objects, okay? And they can still refer to each other. Objects on one collection can refer to objects in another collection, yes, right? But it's not the main way of breaking up the data structure. Make sense? Right? So MongoDB, you could treat it just like a relational database, although it's not meant to be a relational database. If you're thinking about foreign keys and primary keys, then perhaps you want to stick to relational databases, right? And there are going to be some aspects that those who have taken relational database, you'll find somewhat similar, but again, think objects. We are storing objects, right? Instances of objects into a database. Who has done here Java? And anybody used when you can serialize an object to a file system? Anybody done that? Where you can store an object and serialize it to a file system, and then you can unserialize it and bring it back and instantiate it back into memory. Yes? Okay. So this is somewhat similar, right? You are storing in Java, in a file system, you're storing a object representation, okay, for later retrieval. Okay, so think of MongoDB more in that sense, right, where we can serialize to a file system, to a database, several instances of objects that can then be reinstantiated at a later time in memory. Okay, right. So just like serialized Java objects onto a file system is not a relational database. Okay, MongoDB is not a relational database. Right, it's a store of objects. All right. Okay. So we should have already installed it locally on our machines. You can look up the MongoDB Community Edition. You can download it and install it locally. When you install it for the different vendors, for OS, Windows, Linux, when you install it, there will be there will be a bin directory that you should put in your path, okay, either in your bash profile or if you're doing Windows, in your settings, in your environment variable settings. Right? You should add the MongoDB bin directory in your path. And now I have, mine is installed under user local MongoDB. There it is. This is where my MongoDB is installed. If you go in there, there will be a bin directory. If you go into that bin directory, there's a couple of executables that we want to have on the path. Okay? Again, depending what you have, Windows or Mac. In particular, we're going to be using a couple of these quite often. One of them is mongod. Mongod. That's the daemon that when you start, it starts off the database running locally in your machine. Okay, and by default, it listens at a particular port. I forget what it is, 27,137 or something like that. Right, it starts up a server and it starts listening for incoming HTTP requests. Okay, the other executable that we are going to be using quite a bit is Mongo. Okay, Mongo is a client application, right? That's going to connect to the server, right? And then it allows you to have a command line interaction session with the server. Okay, it connects to the server, and you can start communicating with it. Now, to start MongoDB, I'm not sure. I probably already have it running. Now, on a Mac, you typically you'll need to run it using sudo. On PCs, I don't believe you need to do sudo. Just MongoDB will work. Okay, I already have one already running, so it failed on me. But this is the port that it usually wants to run at, 27,017. It also assumes that you have this directory off of your root of the root of your machine, /data/db. That's where Mongo is going to store all your databases. Okay, all your data will be stored there. You can override that, and you can provide a flag saying that you want the database to be stored elsewhere, but that's the default place. That is the default place. Okay. So Mongo is already running and listening for incoming requests at port 27017. So now we can start Mongo. Mongo is going to be the client that connects to the database, and there it is, and we can't read it. Why can't we read that? Mirror display, maybe?